Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the first TEDx event in Daly City, TEDxWestmoor High School. We're so excited to have you with us tonight for an exciting lineup of speakers from all walks of life. As you know, the current COVID-19 situation has forced us to transition from a traditionally in-person event to a virtual one. However, our team of organizers and speakers have been working relentlessly to make TEDxWestmoor High School a night to remember. So, if you're ready to shape your future, sit back, relax, and welcome to our TED Talk. Our first speaker is a private equities investor at the Carlyle Group, a large private equity firm, where she focuses on leveraged buyouts and growth transactions. She will be speaking about her difficult journey leading up to the success she has in her career. Here's to give her talk, Facing Rejection. Please welcome Stacey Zhou.
Thank you for having me, Westmoor High School. My name is Stacey Zhou, and I'm honored to be here talking with you today. I hope everyone is doing well, staying home with your families, taking virtual classes. It's an incredibly tough time, and high school in general is a time of high highs and low lows. People often say that college is the best and worst time of your life, that it's one of the most formative experiences in your life. But I actually found that high school was much more formative. The pressure of getting the right grades, participating in the right extracurriculars, getting the best possible SAT score, all right under the very close eye of my well-meaning parents, was very real. Everything felt like it was life or death, which I can now assure you it is not. The friends that lifted me up when I felt like I was buckling under the stress then are still some of my best friends today. A little bit of quick background on myself. I was born in the DC area to two parents who immigrated to the US from China in their 20s. We did all right, but we weren't wealthy, and they both worked full-time. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I knew that I didn't like my biology class, so probably didn't want to be a doctor. Computer science also wasn't my strong suit, so I eliminated going into engineering, and I eventually narrowed it down to business. My top choice for college was Wharton, the undergraduate business school at University of Pennsylvania, but I didn't get in. I was devastated, but I knew that I could always try again. During my freshman year at college, I applied to transfer to Wharton and got in the second time. Fast forward a few years, I did the popular thing to do at the time, found myself a job in investment banking, moved to San Francisco, and spent several years in banking where I did what many other banking analysts do, which was to find a job on the investing side after. I now work at a big private equity firm called the Carlyle Group, which used to be known for hiring ex-presidents, but now may be better known to you for being called out by Taylor Swift for our investments in Scooter Braun's music label. Outside of work, I'm very involved in a nonprofit called Destined for X that provides an annual summer program and year-round mentorship program to help high school students like you connect with professionals across a variety of backgrounds gain some of the softer skills required in their future and explore their passions. Today, I want to tell you a little story about rejection from my sophomore year of college, after I transferred to Wharton. While I thought I did, I knew nothing about finance, and it felt like I had entered a world in which everyone at school came from a wealthy Wall Street family in New York City with lots of connections. It felt like they were better than I was, and equally as important, better connected. I was quickly told that if I wanted a good job after college, I needed the right summer internship my junior year, and if I wanted the right internship my junior year, I had better make sure I had the right internship my sophomore year. Meanwhile, I was there still debating whether I should try to go into investment banking, consulting, something else. I pretty much applied wherever I could that year and received rejection after rejection. I would call my parents crying, and they had no idea what to do to help me. I must have applied to more than 50 positions that year and became very accustomed to hearing no. I finally got an interview at this tiny 3-man investment bank and a follow-up application homework assignment of creating a company profile. I created something that must have looked like trash because when I gave it to a friend who was a few years older to look at, he tore it apart and he gave me the harsh feedback of start over and here's how. But it worked, and I eventually got the internship. There are 2 key lessons that I took away from that experience. The first was the importance of asking for help. Had I not dug deep into the resources available at the school and within my network, I would have had no idea where to look for opportunities or how to act in an interview. My resume would have still looked terrible, and I would have submitted my terrible first draft of the assignment, and I would definitely not have gotten that job. The second lesson was that it doesn't matter how many times you hear no. You just need one firm, one person to tell you yes. If I had given up after 5, 10, 50 rejections, I would not be here where I am today. Research shows that being rejected can actually cause our brains to react like it does with physical pain. But when you get rejected, you need to grow some thicker skin and try again as many times as you need. The job that summer wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a sleek tower with people wearing 3-piece suits and $1,000 watches like it is in the movies. It was a 2-office sublet in the Abercrombie & Fitch building in New York. So every day that summer, I just scoot past lines of tourists going to the flagship Abercrombie store, into a small elevator that smelled very strongly of cologne, then write company profiles to pitch potential clients on, and dig through public financial filings for details around similar company financial profiles. However, it was a foot in the door. I found in my experience that the first yes is the hardest to get. Once I had that first job in investment banking, the second one was a lot easier. My junior year, I braced myself for another set of long, grueling, stressful months of being told no and digging deep for motivation. And while I did hear a number of rejections, including but definitely not limited to Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, I received a much larger number of interviews and found a team at Bank of America who was interested in taking a chance on me. I flew out to San Francisco and sat through 7 hours of long interviews that ranged from accounting to investing to market sizing. I had spent months prepping for exactly this, and I got the job. In preparation for this interview season, though, I had asked another set of older friends and acquaintances who I knew would tell me the harsh truth to help me prep. And I was told that I needed to do better and study more for my interviews. So at least in investment banking, your junior summer internship becomes essentially an interview for your full-time job. And I worked long, grueling hours to increase my chances of getting the full-time job. Oftentimes, later stage companies are acquired by private equity firms who pay for the company with money from their fund and money from banks. So my job that summer was working for the investment banking team that provided the debt behind those big purchases, which meant in practice that a client would come in with a request for a large amount of money, and we had to work quickly to provide them with an answer. I had to model out all the possible scenarios, good and bad, in Excel, and create long PowerPoint decks to facilitate conversations to discuss the request. While it meant a lot of hours in front of a computer, including lunches, late nights, many weekends, I learned a lot and was excited to return after graduation. Not long after I started as an investment banking analyst, I started to explore other career opportunities out there, specifically moving to the investing side. Private equity, it's like late-stage venture capital. You're taking a majority stake in a company that's already grown to a certain size. It's often an alternative to taking a company public. Today, I still spend a lot of hours in Excel and PowerPoint, but I also get to meet with the CEOs of a lot of interesting companies and ask them about their business. I get to attend now virtual board meetings of some of the companies that we've already invested in. And private equity recruiting often goes through headhunters who are middlemen in the process, and many of them actually tried to tell me no, that I wasn't good enough for some of their best clients. But I had learned a few years before that there was always a way to push through. I'm still early in my career, and I probably have a lot more changes to come and challenges to look forward to. But those two key lessons really stuck with me when I was first trying to get my foot in the door. I encourage you all to not become discouraged when you face rejection. Instead, I want you to keep getting up and trying again. Don't let rejection make you think differently of yourself. Only you know your true value. And remind yourself that oftentimes all you need is that one yes. Also, ask for help when you need it. No one can do everything by themselves. I'm here today because of all the help that I received along the way, and those who helped me are there because of others who helped them. Your friends, families, teachers are all here to help support you along the way. But help is not just limited to those who know you right now. There are a number of summer programs and mentorship programs available to you, including Destined for X. You can also reach out and send an email to anyone out there who you would be interested in talking to. You would be surprised by how many people out there care. You just have to ask. I know it's cliche, but if there is one thing to take away from today, I want you to remember to never give up. To always just keep standing up and trying again. Thank you.
Our second speaker is a senior at Westmoor High School. She is passionate about soccer and track and field, as well as serving her community as a Westmoor Service Commissioner and a leader in the Filipino Barkada Club on campus. Here to give her talk, running into new opportunities, please welcome Johanna Dsouza.
Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. High school is one of the most intense 4 years of your life, in which you experience the most growth in your highest and your lowest battles. For me, high school was filled with changes, some of which challenged me the most into choosing what was best for me and for my self-growth. My freshman year, I was brought into one of my biggest passions, cross-country. Cross-country not only gave me a supportive family of people who helped me through my tough battles, but it also gave me an outlet to relieve my stress and to relieve any struggles that I had within me. I worked extra hard my freshman year. I trained longer outside of practice, as well as I always did one more repetition of the workout. I even had to give up hanging out with my friends often because we had practice every day, as well as meets on the weekends. Through all of that, I eventually was put on varsity as a freshman, and later on I was awarded freshman MVP, something that I will never forget. My sophomore year was the year that I wanted to go beyond my limits. And I did just that, as I trained all summer to get my results during practice. However, really early into the season, during our third race, I collapsed halfway through during the varsity girls race, and I was unconscious. I started to shake, and I saw blobs of blackness. My lungs collapsed, and my heart stopped. I woke up in an ambulance, unsure of where I was going, or what was even happening. All I felt was a sharp pain in my chest. I was in the ER for hours, and I was visited by my coaches and my family. They were so worried about me. The doctors couldn't figure out what had happened, so I was traveling to multiple hospitals all over the Bay Area my sophomore year in hopes of finding out what was wrong with my heart through a specialist. I left school early left and right, and I even had to be excused some days. Hence, my motivations and my grades started to drop drastically. Why did this happen to me, and how can I grow from this? Why did this occur during a sport that gave me the most happiness and motivation? I questioned myself and what had happened for months. Eventually, a specialist was able to tell me that I had a heart murmur, a hole in my heart that prevents blood from flowing at an even pace, and it can cause chest pains if I exercise at an intense level for too long. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces, and I had to make the hardest decision of my life. I had to quit cross country because of my health complications. I was down for weeks, and I was full of sadness, but I knew that everything did happen for a reason. There had to be a purpose for this event happening. After all, sometimes we lose something to gain something else, right? I decided to slowly get myself back up, to look at the bigger perspective of things. Self-care played a big role in my journey as well. I needed time to have to myself, to have that alone time, to journal, to listen to music, to do face masks, and to just drive around to my favorite areas to think and let all my feelings out. Improving my mental health also included learning how to take breaks and manage my time so I would get more sleep to do things that ease my stress, such as playing music, something that I'm super passionate about. A big part of my journey was also having the support of my family, my friends, as well as the will to want to become a better version of myself. I found motivation in wanting to succeed in school, so I studied harder, and I was on top of my assignments for that whole semester with the time I had left to grasp. I brought my grades up, and I brought my grades up to straight A's, and I received a 4.0 that semester, even though I broke almost my 14-year perfect attendance. I was really proud about that, by the way. I decided to seize new opportunities to connect with more people at my school. I was more involved in Filipino Barkada, a club that involves everyone in raising awareness of community issues here and in the Philippines. Block W, a club that helps those in need, and Service Commission, also known as Green Hats on Campus, that help with all community events as well as keeping the school safe and a better place. The reason that I decided to give back is because the community has given and blessed me with so much and so many opportunities to grow into a better person, as well as it has offered me so many new connections with people who are now so important in my life. Ending off my sophomore year, I knew the loss of cross country helped me gain new friends and new lessons through the clubs I became more active in. But I needed something more. There was something in my heart that was missing. During the summer, I went through a lot of family issues and a breakup, just like most teenagers. But I reminded myself that the next downfall was only setting me up for a bigger comeback, so I continued to remain optimistic, to seek support from my family and my friends. I also had set my mind on playing soccer, so when junior year tryouts rolled in, I was not where I wanted to be, but with my soccer skills. However, it was just my first year, so I knew I would have more time to become more focused, and I just needed to train more with a passion. Once I set my mind to becoming a better student, I now added all the efforts I had in me to become a better athlete. The support I received from my teammates and those in my life made it worth it to keep trying. I tried out a new position as a goalie, and I trained harder on the weekends and sometimes before or after practice started. Despite injuries and pain, I pushed through, working the hardest I ever have, along with knowing when I had to take breaks because of my heart. At the end of the season, I was awarded goalie of the league, as well as keeper of the year, playing our last few games with none or few goals. Through all the doubts I faced along with my heart murmur, I remembered that I had to lose something to gain another. And soccer has made me grow, even more as a person, and is now one of my biggest passions. Soccer has taught me so many things about myself and has given me such amazing opportunities. So, despite the hits that will knock you down, and the moments that will lift you up during high school, it is in your control on how you overcome these hardships, and how you change your perspective lens, how you see these hardships and these losses as gains. You can also see them as new opportunities. I am still fighting every day with my health, along with most problems we teens deal with, but I never, ever will forget my roots and how I was strong enough to overcome a lot of battles, so I'm even tougher to keep pushing and keep facing more. Right now, I have finished my soccer season, and I had a memorable senior night. Although the current pandemic has affected my track season and my club commitments, I am still striving to find new and creative ways to keep up my connections with others via Zoom, as well as still meeting with my clubs that I'm still a part of. The quarantine had also made me realize how valuable it is to be able to go out, to be able to see your family and your friends so often as I did. I have used my time in isolation to better myself by providing more time for self-care, whether it's face masks, journaling, or even jamming to music. I also have had time to work out more and to catch up on new hobbies that I never had time for before, such as really improving my guitar skills. You are strong, and you can overcome anything with the mindset of knowing that everything that happens in your life is in your control to change into something better, and something even more meaningful. It all starts with a little push to be motivated more. Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. My name is Johanna Dsouza, and thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk.
Our third speaker is a senior at Westmoor High School who loves computers and technology. He is an aspiring computer scientist who enjoys writing codes that lessens the work he does, one script at a time. Here to give his talk, Automation Preparation, please welcome Yuto Nishida.
Alright, so I'm going to begin with a quick example. My name is Yuto Nishida, and I'm an aspiring computer scientist who has a minor obsession with automation. Take a look at this table. This is an example of a federal tax table for single or married employees. The leftmost two columns represent the salary range for some period of time, and the numbers at the top row are allowances, which is basically the number of people that depend on this employee's income. Each cell in the table represents the amount the employee has to pay. Additionally, the table is actually cropped. So here's what the whole thing looks like. You can probably already imagine this, but looking up these values isn't fun at all. The work is really repetitive, not thought-provoking, it's really easy to make mistakes. So after a few of these assignments, I sat down and made a little web app that pulls this data automatically. There's nothing too fancy going on here. It just looks up values from a 2D array, which is basically a table. But now it's virtually impossible to make a mistake, and I can finish my accounting assignments in a fraction of the original time. And this is one of the reasons why I really love automation. It saves me time that I can use for other activities and hobbies, while still allowing me to produce the work with a quality that's as good as the original, and usually even better than if I do so manually. Today, I'm here to talk about automation. So what exactly is automation? The idea is simple. Instead of a person perform a task, you have a computer, robot, or a machine do it instead. However, automation is also quite controversial. For starters, there's glaring ethical problems. In a situation where a self-driving car, for example, is unable to avoid an accident, should it risk hitting and causing fatality to person A or person B? This is a variation of the well-known trolley problem. And when a human makes this decision, they won't be attacked by the spur of the moment that they didn't have time to think through. However, for robots, they have been pre-programmed to compute a choice, and with its almost unlimited computation time, are effectively making a decision after giving it hours, days of thought. Or how about artificial intelligence? Enthusiasts may say machine learning is the field's savior. But did you know the machine learning means that the creators don't know exactly why it works most of the time? This is an example of what's known as a double perovskite. I trained 4 models using 4 different machine learning algorithms, and one of them was able to accurately predict the structure of a compound, essentially what it looks like given its elements. I don't know what the model's thought process is in determining this, and I, nor any other researcher for that matter, can't ever hope to know, because there's hundreds of thousands of variables within the black box that it optimizes ever so slightly with every iteration during a training session. In other words, if someone came up to you and said, I used machine learning to do this, it means that internally, they have absolutely no idea why it works. All they know is that by using statistical analysis, it's able to do some tasks very well. If that doesn't make you uncomfortable, consider this point. Employees are really expensive. The Crown reports that about at least 40% of a business's revenue is spent on employees' salaries and benefits. Companies are really eager to minimize salary costs, and one of the easiest ways to do so is to replace employees with robots. For example, the number of McDonald's establishments have been increasing consistently. However, between 2015 and 2019, the number of employees decreased from 420,000 to just a bit over 200,000, according to Statista, thanks to the new digital orders and kiosks, effectively replacing cashiers. More importantly, this isn't something that hasn't happened before. In the early 20th century, the elevator was quite different. You had someone known as the elevator operator manually administer the elevator box for you. So if you worked in the tall New York City skyscrapers, for example, every morning you would get into the box, go up with the operator inside, after you tell the operator which floor you wanted to visit, and then once you reached your floor, you would get off. And that was the norm. So when modern automatic elevators were introduced, people initially refused to use them. They thought it was really weird that no operator was driving the elevator cars and were worried about its safety, even though they were significantly safer. This is because before safety features, such as pressure-sensitive doors, were introduced, once the operator initiated the closing of the doors, if someone tried running into the box, but let's say tripped and fell, they would essentially be guillotined if they were halfway inside the box and halfway outside. Nowadays, you rarely hear about elevator fatalities. Surprisingly, automatic elevators haven't changed much at all since its invention. And the incentive here is really strong. For every job replaced, a corporation is paying significantly less than a person's wage for its electricity and maintenance costs, and at the same time receive an equal or better quality of service, which is what McDonald's has been doing. The only obstacle protecting these jobs is the existence of a machine to replace them with. Although experts don't agree on exact numbers, most studies reviewed by MIT Tech estimate a net loss of a few million jobs, to the most pessimistic being a few billion within the next decade. Even optimistic studies with net positive increases in jobs don't increase fast enough to outpace world population growth. The risk for replacement is higher than ever. So as high school students, can we protect ourselves? And if so, how should we protect ourselves so that we don't lose our jobs by our 62nd birthday? Professions that are very difficult or impossible to replace are considered safe. The most obvious ones are positions that strictly require human interactions, such as teachers and professors. Lawyers, customer service-like jobs, musicians, and pretty much any position that require interaction with clients, customers, or audience members are a safe bet, since their very existence relies on an employee's ability to communicate or interact with other humans. If you're already in a band or orchestra class, for example, you may want to seriously consider playing professionally. Careers that also require technical thinking, such as engineering and researching, are protected as well. This includes things like repairing services, therapy, and mechanics. If you look closely, you might notice a trend here. With the exception of the entertainment industries, most of these jobs require adaptation to a specific client. That is, applying the same sort of technique, whether it be fixing screen cracks, treating depression, or creating a new air circulation system, for example, for the next client does not work. Not every broken phone has a cracked screen, not every mentally ill patient is depressed, and not every building contractor needs a specialized air system. This lack of pattern makes it really difficult for computers to automate, because automation relies on predictable repetitions. Even for tasks such as self-driving, in the end, as long as the computer can see the road, all it needs to do is repeatedly find obstacles, avoid them, and drive to the destination. So instead of trying to find a job that resists automation, try avoiding jobs that are prone to it. Does this position tend to have a lot of routine tasks? Then they may be really vulnerable. If there's one thing you can take away from this, just remember that repetition can be easily automated. Thank you.
Our fourth speaker is the CFO of Dawson4X, a Bay Area education nonprofit focused on empowering high school students and crafting their future. Furthermore, he works as a data scientist at Lyft. Here to give his talk, Embracing Ambiguity, please welcome Alejandro Perez.
Hello, my name is Alejandro, and I want to talk to you today about how to make the most of your early career. But before we get into that, I think it's very important and incredibly relevant to acknowledge the ongoing crisis that we see in the world today. The COVID pandemic has impacted everything from our jobs to our financial outlooks. Your education might be impacted. Some schools going virtual, and these challenges are quite strong. I think that we're really questioning many parts of our lives. But what I think is really stronger is your reaction to this. So for you to, amidst these really uncertain times, to take the time and say, I'm going to a TED Talk, and I'm going to use this moment of silence to learn more and become more, really speaks magnitudes to the type of person that you are. And I hope that throughout this craziness, you're able to look back on this moment and your reaction with a sense of pride. So when I say thank you for coming today, I really do mean thank you, and that I appreciate the effort and thoughtfulness that goes into thinking like this during these crazy times. Let me explain why I think this is very relevant to your kind of early career and frankly throughout your entire life, and that I hope that this skill that you're demonstrating already of leaning into curiosity during uncertainty is something that you follow, because I think that it's not only going to make you successful, I think it's going to bring you fulfillment through many parts of your life. So I'm involved in a nonprofit called Destin for X, and at Destin for X we work with underprivileged and underrepresented minorities to help them craft their own fulfilling futures. And we understand that there's a tremendous amount of work to be done in this area, but we've narrowed our scope and we work specifically on the areas of this problem associated with perception and identity. And so in years of working with our high school and college age students, we've noticed many problems that they face in kind of shaping their own perception of themselves. And one of the most frequent that we encounter is the struggle with passion. So many of our students, I personally also got this advice, was the advice of follow your passion. Do what you're passionate about. And this is coming from teachers, counselors, people of who know what they're talking about, really. But I don't think that it's completely correct. I think it's well intentioned, but I think that telling somebody to follow their passion gives a false sense of absolutism to how we should spend our time. And in some way, it actually complicates the problem. So it's actually very reasonable to react with confusion and kind of analysis paralysis in thinking about, okay, what is my passion, right? If you're a high school student or a college student, you might not know what that is. And it's kind of absurd, actually, to think that somebody could answer such a profound question without any experience outside of the classroom. So if you find yourself feeling that way, know that it's incredibly common, and it's something that follows us, throughout our lives. And but one method that we found to cope with it has been to address the search with curiosity rather than absolutism. And what I'm getting at is that I don't believe that passion is an inherent quality. I don't think that there's like one thing that we just have this calling for, and as soon as we get there, it's going to click. I think that we are better off being curious and asking deep questions about how the world works and how society works. And then in convincing yourself that the answers to those questions are important, you'll end up getting the experiences and developing the skills that are needed to bring you closer to the ground truth, or in order closer to having the impact on the world that you want to see. So in essence, what I'm getting at is that I think the best advice I can give you for your early career or for your life in general is to ask big questions and to enthusiastically pursue the answer to those questions, wherever they might take you. What does that look like in practice? It's always difficult bringing these kind of existential ideas down to reality, but maybe an example will help. So when I was growing up, there were two things that every parent told their children, right? The first was to never get in the car with a stranger, and certainly never to meet anybody on the internet. Right? These were considered just bad ideas. However, now, my most recent job, for example, was working at Lyft, where effectively my job was to get as many internet strangers into other internet strangers' cars as possible. And this just reflects a tremendous shift, right, in how these are kind of ground truths that we expected to be good advice, but which through questioning and understanding realize that maybe this is an opportunity for us to shift how society is organized. And so you fast forward a couple of years, and now Lyft and Uber are doing 50 million rides a week, just in the U.S. And so this is a pretty profound change. But this is to say that it really started from a reimagining of what should and shouldn't be in this world. And there's two components to that example which I think are particularly powerful. So first is the idea of these disruptors being tech companies, and oftentimes the Lyfts and Ubers and Airbnbs, etc. of the world get lauded as technological disruptors. And while that's true, much of the work there cannot be done without technological breakthroughs that occurred recently. I firmly believe that these are actually more so cultural shifts. These are shifts associated with how people spend their time, how they spend their money, not moving out of cities until much older in life, or not buying cars. And these changes, while enabled by technology, were only possible through the questioning of how we should organize ourselves in society. And so the second point of that example I really love is the recency of it. Right? These are, like I mentioned, these two tenets of child rearing really were commonplace just 10, 15 years ago. And so to start at that point and to move in less than a full generation to where we are today really speaks to the speed with which we can bring about and effectuate these change. So hopefully you can seize these examples and use them as a motivator to think deeply about all aspects of your life, and to understand that very quickly you can see change trickle down to reality and bring about a world that you're more excited about. So as I wrap up, I want to end on a personal note, and that's that I believe a huge part of success is in properly defining it. So one thing that I like to spend a lot of time when I'm working with students at Destined for X is to share my own definition of success, and to work with them to define their own. Personally, I've chosen to ascribe to the definition of success that success is the ability to navigate from one uncertainty to another without losing optimism or confidence. But with that, I remain incredibly excited to see what you all achieve. Wish you the best, and thank you for listening.
Our fifth speaker is a senior at Westmoor High School. He's known for his bright personality and witty humor, as well as his dedication to environmental causes as the vice president of Westmoor's Environmental Action Club. He's also an unassuming artist with a fascination with using interesting materials as part of his artwork. Here to give his talk, Plastic Feathers, please welcome Dawson Tam.
AP Art? More like AP Not. Yarr! I didn't sign up for this class because as an artist myself, I needed the liberty to freely express myself, and taking this class would place countless restrictions on my artistic visions. I forgot to sign up for the class. Long story short, I can now do whatever the heck I want with my art. So there I was, getting nowhere. I mean, ooh, look at me. I'm using acrylic and drawing on board. I've been doing that for years. Plus, I can do better than that ostrich or whatever the heck it was. Yeah, I hit rock bottom. But wait, I didn't. The Environmental Action Club, you know, the club that's responsible for bringing attention to the impact us humans have on the environment. Yeah, and a club for which I'm vice president for, came up with truly one of the most ingenious, brilliant, smart ideas ever. Making art out of plastic that would have otherwise gone to the trash. Now, normally I would have skipped this harder than a YouTube ad for McDonald's burgers. Da-da-da-da-da, I'm loving lies. Come on, we all know your burgers don't look like that, but nay. I saw this as an opportunity to create trash art. Yeah. Well, not trash art, but you get the gist of it. So I went down to my garage, you know, to find some plastic that I could use for my art. It could be anything, a milk jug, a milk crate, a milk jug. We had lots of plastic, it didn't matter. Anything my dad didn't want I could use, but wait. We had lots of plastic. Where was it coming from? To answer my questions, I took myself to the deep dark corners of the interweb, you know, did some research and became somewhat of a scientist myself. Here, let me run some stats by you. According to RecycleNow.com, the average American high school student uses around 99.2 pounds of plastic per academic year. The Guardian states that America as a whole, we use 242 million pounds of plastic per year. Now, I know what you're thinking. 99.2 is such an insignificant number compared to 242 million. But you gotta keep in mind that there's maybe like 20 high schools in each state and maybe like 50 states in the United States. So let's do the math. 50 times 20 times 99.2. Yeah, I just did it. I just did the math. That definitely equals 242 million. So the takeaway here is that every little pound of plastic really does add up and make a larger impact on our environment. But that's not all. I went on another website and did some more research and found that as of 2020, there's going to be 5.25 trillion bits of plastic debris floating around the world's oceans. That translates to roughly about 150 plastic bags per person per year. Therefore, 100 marine mammals die every year. Just last year, we had a dead gray whale on Ocean Beach, and April 27 quarantine, yeah. Another humpback whale died on SF shores. Oh, dead. It's really heart-wrenching. But with all this knowledge, I decided on how I want to make my project. A plastic seagull. Seagulls are one of those birds that you see and immediately think, oh, the ocean. However, more than 1 million of these beautiful seabirds die every year. Seagulls are so beautiful in the fact that they can fly in the most tempest of winds. You know, improvise, adapt, overcome. So with this project, I would basically be doing the same thing. I would be becoming a seagull. Yeah. So I started the project, but Dawson's never made a 3D sculpture, let alone use plastic trash. But after I thought about it, if I'm making a plastic seagull, I mean, come on, seagulls these days already have so much plastic in them. No, but I eventually did finish the project, and I'm pretty proud of it. Here, let me show you. See, here's my seagull right here. And this project was actually kind of interesting in the fact that I couldn't make anything. Rather, I had to reimagine bits of plastic as parts of a seagull. As you can see, for the beak, I use a nice little shampoo squirter. And for the head, I use a nice little plastic cup. For the body, here, that's where it really gets interesting. So I use like a plastic champagne bottle for the body, and also I hacksawed off 2 toilet cleaners, spit shined them, hot glued them on for the seagull's wings, and you know, target bags for the wings, and for the tail I use nice little egg cartons. Plus, the seagull can actually fly. I mean, I wasn't the only one that took part in this artistic adventure here. Some of my colleagues and friends did the same thing. Let's take a look. This guy over here, he hacksawed a milk jug in half, you know, upcycled it and recycled it into a nice little plastic planter. 2 other people made some plastic home decor by, you know, intertwining some plastic, looping them, sticking them in some mugs, cups, or whatever the heck that is. But that's a pretty smart idea. I mean, you won't even have to go IKEA anymore. Those things last forever. Another person over here made a Minecraft boat because... Minecraft boat. But back to me. I'm the TED talker here. To me, I finally created something that wasn't selfish in the fact that it wasn't for me. Rather, this sculpture was like a reminder of our ever-increasing plastic usage and that our seemingly insignificant daily life choices can affect our planet going forward. So the next time you go and buy that plastic bag of air from Lay's, I want you to consider this. Are those 2 potato chips really worth the earth suffering for years to come? Just a thought. My name's Dawson Tam, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Our sixth speaker is a junior at Westmoor High School. He is a writer and storyteller who's also dabbled in a bit of composing, although he considers himself a jack of all trades when it comes to art. He has a flair for dramatics and a knack for figurative language and enjoys immersing himself into fictional worlds. Here's to give his talk, Creating Your Character Arc. Please welcome CJ Campos.
At this stage in our lives, teens are put to a decision. To answer what seems like an impossible question that only they know the answer to. Who am I? What am I doing? Who am I going to be? And I'm not talking about your job or your goals. There are multiple teachers, counselors, and websites that can just answer that question for you. I want you all to ask yourselves, what kind of person do I want to be? I think we all have similarities in our answers. Considerate, assertive, passionate, independent, the list goes on. But let's be honest. Is this development something we can easily do? To become this idealized version of ourselves, to grow as human beings, it takes a lot of time, effort, and introspection. To grow, we have to be willing to stare into our voids and see what lies within our minds and our hearts. And that can be scary for a lot of people. And they have every right to be afraid. To look into our shadows, see the parts of us that are broken, battered, and bleeding. It can be difficult at times. But there are ways to make it easier on ourselves. Humanity has been using storytelling as a solution to their problems for as long as we've existed. Folk tales, mythologies, even fairy tales, stories, all of them featuring metaphors and stand-ins for things humanity doesn't understand at that time. But what stories of magic and monsters could we possibly use to help us gain a greater insight into who we are and our issues? Well, look no further than Dimension 20 and Critical Role. Each of these fully improvised shows stand as titans in the Dungeons & Dragons community for their heart, wit, and genuine storytelling, unafraid to dig deep within the cast and characters, painting brilliant narratives that make you weep tears of joy, then sadness in the blink of an eye. They give us a bounty of characters filled with issues and dreams, placing narratives that give us a greater insight into ourselves and our connection with those around us. Dimension 20's Fantasy High is a beautiful coming-of-age story between a group of students known as the Bad Kids, who they go about solving mysteries and uncovering conspiracies within their town of Elmville. But, most importantly, they're all teenagers. They're all at the point in their lives where they're trying their best to figure themselves out despite the problems around them. Though they may be elves, goblins, and orcs, these characters are deeply rooted in modern-day issues and problems. Critical Role's second season features the Mighty Nine, a band of problematic people searching for a place where they can belong. They're all faced with challenges, overcoming past trauma, some attempting to free themselves from their dark pasts, whether it be rescuing a friend from the control of a devil, or confronting an organization that ruined a friend's life. By taking inspiration from these characters and their own individual arcs, we can undergo our own character development to grow and improve into better versions of ourselves, despite all of our faults and follies. And because Critical Role and Dimension 20 are completely improvised, we get to see these characters naturally develop. They aren't fully planned stories with predetermined arcs and endings for each of these characters. We see them all live out their lives, overcome challenges, and as the show progresses, we see them learn and grow and we can take inspiration from their choices and actions to help ourselves develop in who we want to be. Let's take, for instance, Caleb Widogast, a character from Critical Role. In early episodes, we learn that Caleb is a wizard with incredible ambitions. He has difficulty trusting in others and is filled with immense self-loathing and guilt. He's haunted by his past mistakes, believing he doesn't deserve happiness or kindness. He believed he was a terrible person, and quite frankly, he was. But not for long. As the show continued, Caleb grew. He began reaching out to other characters, building relationships, learning to trust in his friends, and them learning to trust in him. And soon, he even saw them as a new family. The Mighty Nine, they love and care for Caleb, regardless of his past actions. And when met with an individual that resembled his past self, Caleb welcomed them with open arms, treating him with the same kindness and mercy that his friends showed him. When I first watched the show, I immediately latched onto Caleb. I saw myself in him. To me, if Caleb could be redeemed, that meant I could as well. I wanted to see him redeem himself. I wanted to see him grow better because he stood as this beacon of hope for me in a time where I desperately and horrendously hated myself for all the things I've done, as minor as some of them may be. And to see him be loved and accepted by the people around him, to even gain a new family in them, it was tear-jerkingly beautiful to watch. Caleb's story was one of learning that no one is defined by their past actions, that who we are today is determined by what we do now. And for me, someone riddled with huge amounts of guilt and regret, it was so important to hear it. Now, let's be honest. It's hard for some of us to relate to these types of characters who combat monsters on a daily basis. After all, we're normal people. It's not like we can do anything of, like, casting spells or brandishing a sword against a giant. Well, that doesn't mean we're not capable of doing great things. Look at Galir, a fan and cast favorite from Dimension 20's Fantasy High. Galir is a normal guy. We're reminded time and time again that Galir is the most pathetic character in the entire show. Brendan Lee Mulligan, the man who plays Galir, fully goes out of his way to put Galir in the most humiliating and self-deprecating situations as possible. His stepdaughter Fig, on the other hand, goes out of her way and tries to give Galir moments and chances where he can finally shine and prove to himself that he isn't as pathetic as he truly believes himself to be. Galir is a prime example in building self-confidence and battling self-doubt. He's constantly compared to the greatness and success of the protagonists, as well as other characters around them, simply by association. But despite all this, even after all of the horrendous humiliation, Galir does his best to love and protect his daughter. His arc took 2 whole seasons to finally reach its conclusion. It was a journey of discovering self-worth, a path I and many other teens face even today. But it's not simply a matter of Galir doing one thing and proving himself a hero. He's traveled through the depths of hell, explored the pirate city of Leviathan, even sacrificed his life in the Nightmare King's forest to protect his stepdaughter. Galir shows us that our worth is not determined in our own eyes, but in the moments where we shine the brightest, proving to not just the people around us, but to ourselves just how incredible we can be and truly are. I can tell you from my own experience that these shows have opened my eyes to a deeper understanding of who I am and my connection to those around me. I've felt abandoned and forgotten for so long in my life, believing I was some sort of leftovers friend, someone you'd turn to when no one else was available. But watching these shows, it made me feel like I belong somewhere. Hearing Fig make Galir say positive affirmations in the mirror, it struck a chord in my heart. Hearing Caleb's friends tell him how much he is valued, appreciated, and loved, I fully cried. I saw in a fictional character what my friends were trying to tell me all along. And when the time came for Caleb to realize how much he's loved, I did the same. Critical Role and Dimension 20 aren't just fantasy stories told in an impossible world. They're windows to people who we could be if we're willing to look inside ourselves and follow the paths they point us toward. What is fantasy other than a reality we long to be in? We may not be able to change lead into gold, but we can change ourselves into people we are meant to be. So look back on those characters and their stories, and let them help you write your own. I'm CJ Campos, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Over his decade-long sustainability driven career, he has worked on a variety of projects from conceptual design for the world's tallest skyscraper to a custom trophy case for a small man named Oscar. Here to give his talk, Sustainable Architecture, the Decade Behind and Ahead. Please welcome Corey Schnobrich.
Hello, my name is Corey Schnobrich, and I'm going to be talking to you about sustainable architecture, in particular about how the next 10 years will be critical for us to address global climate change. The challenge is considerable, and our goals are ambitious, but we can and must get better. I work for a firm called Letty Madam Stacey Architects in the Mission District of San Francisco. We are an increasingly diverse group of designers and sometimes activists who provide environmentally and socially progressive environments for mission-driven clients in Northern California. I came to LMS somewhat recently, though. I've been practicing architecture for about 10 years. My career began in the place I grew up, southern Minnesota. If you're one of the few Californians that haven't happened to vacation there, it's a landscape of farmland interspersed with small towns where the largest landmarks aren't office towers, but water towers, church steeples, and grain bins. The very first project I worked on at my very first architecture internship was for Christensen Farms. They are one of the largest family-owned pork producers in the country, marketing, which is a nice way of saying slaughtering, 3 million hogs per year. Did I tell my firm that I'd recently become a vegetarian? I did not. In the years that followed, I've touched dozens of projects, some of which I'm quite proud of, and others that I feel more ambiguous about. In the latter camp, there was the master plan project in Shanghai, where we dropped in some high-rises originally designed for the Middle East. Or the project in Houston, Texas, where we designed an all-glass roof, and when the glass didn't look quite right, we just replaced it entirely. Or the retail store in Brooklyn, New York, where a new employee thanked me personally for preserving the original brick from the old building, when in reality, we tore it all down and built it to look similar. So that little bit of personal history is all to say that I have aided and abetted in many crimes against the planet, but I'm now out on parole and I'm trying to make amends. And there's no time like the present, for as you are well aware, it's getting hot. So in order to keep global temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius in line with the Paris Climate Agreement, the next decade will be critical. Our buildings have had and will continue to have a lot to do with that. The material extraction, construction, and operation of buildings accounts for nearly 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions globally. In addition, in the next 35 years, the International Energy Agency expects that we will build 2.5 trillion square feet of area in new buildings, which is the equivalent of building the current floor area of Japan every year until 2060. In order to do our part to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, an organization called Architecture 2030 launched the 2030 Challenge to encourage designers to reduce fossil fuel greenhouse gas emitting energy use over time. The challenge calls for an 80% reduction in energy use for structures built today and net zero energy by the year 2030. The challenge is steep. Our own firm tracks each of our buildings against this measure, and frankly, we're falling short, along with the majority of firms across the country. This may be cause for pessimism and cynicism, but there are actually reasons to be optimistic. From 2011 to 2018, energy use intensity from buildings across the globe dropped. And though every region is falling well short of the 2030 Challenge targets, average performance of buildings gets better year over year. And when we think about what can change in a decade, there's also a reason for hope. So over the last 10 years, the cost of energy efficient LED lighting has dropped more than 85% and sales have tripled. Over the same time frame, the cost of solar panels, or photovoltaics as we call them, has dropped 90% per unit of energy, making them significantly more affordable, both for homes and building owners. In addition to technology that drives down our on-site energy, the places that we get the remaining energy we do need also continue to be greener. From 2008 to 2018, the amount of renewable energy in California's electrical mix tripled, and the amount of electricity from coal declined 5-fold. Of course, all the best technology is pretty insignificant if you don't have a government that encourages its use or clients that recognize their responsibility to address climate change. Fortunately for us, we have both in California and the Bay Area. The first project I'd like to share is Rene Casanave Apartments in downtown San Francisco, which houses 120 formerly homeless individuals. This project is an example of permanent supportive housing where residents are provided with a long-term home and social services are provided on-site to help ensure they don't end up back on the streets. While this type of housing is expensive to build and to operate, studies have shown it is both highly effective of keeping individuals housed and in good health. One might assume this kind of project would have a bare bone budget and minimum sustainable features, but that's not what this client wanted. They wanted a building that promoted social and environmental justice and an environment that lent dignity to its inhabitants. So it has ample daylight for interior spaces and outdoor courtyards and roof gardens for residents to use. It has a rooftop canopy full of solar panels and highly insulated exterior walls. After it opened, we spoke to the residents about how the building was serving their needs, and one man told us that he felt grateful every day for his very modestly sized studio because he said he lived like a millionaire. In addition to affordable housing, we also work on a lot of schools, both kindergarten through 12th grade and universities. So one example of this is the Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation at the University of California, Berkeley. Like Rene Casanave Apartments, it has a prominent rooftop solar panel array, but in addition to this very visual feature, it has a lot of sustainable attributes that you might not notice immediately. First, the building shape is oriented to best capture the sun, which benefits those solar panels, but also brings light into the great majority of the spaces. So light shades and shelves cut out unwanted sun while bouncing light deep into the space, limiting the amount of electrical lighting needed for classrooms and offices. Second, operable windows are provided that allow for natural ventilation, both within rooms and where possible across the whole building. This ventilation reduces the amount of mechanical cooling we need to provide. Third, all water from the building's roof is captured and treated on-site before being released. So once we optimize these natural or passive features, we look towards technology to reduce energy use. So LED lighting complements any spaces not provided by daylighting. Energy efficient heating and cooling systems provide for a comfortable environment when natural ventilation isn't sufficient. And low flow fixtures such as sinks and toilets reduce the amount of water used within the building to half of a standard education facility. In addition to schools and affordable housing, we also have a fair amount of experience in what's called adaptive reuse, or taking historic structures and updating them for a modern need. So one example of this is the San Francisco Art Institute at Fort Mason, designed to house over 160 art studios and galleries for graduate students. There's a saying in our field that the most sustainable building is the one that already exists. And we think about that a lot when both creating new ground-up buildings and cases like this when we're repurposing existing structures. We ask ourselves, how will this building age? How will it accommodate growth and expansion or entirely new uses? And how will it be resilient, made to last for this generation, but also for the next 3? Thankfully at Fort Mason, we inherited a building that had good bones, and even if it needed a lot of work for new use. We started by first restoring the exterior and the foundations, and after that phase we moved to the interior, creating new studios and gathering spaces that nested inside of the historic shell. And like the previous 2 projects I shared, we focused first on passive strategies, including kind of opening up a central spine with existing high windows, which helps draw light down into the interior of the building. In March, we received the sad news that the Art Institute is closing, but we know that the building is in good shape for whoever may call it home next. So those are some examples of what we did on past projects, but we try to get better for every new building as well. This is a project we're currently working on for an organic vegetarian food company. They came to us with the goal of creating a new net zero energy office campus, and we proposed a mass timber structure with very narrow floor plates for optimal daylighting and ventilation, topped by this large solar panel array. They said, hey, that's great, but we can't afford a building that big, we can't afford a structure of that type, and we can't afford an enclosure that has so many windows. So we went back to the drawing board and we returned with some new ideas. We proposed a steel structure on a regular grid, which means it's easy to add on to later, or heaven forbid, to take down and recycle. And even though the client can't afford to buy all of these solar panels, we oriented the building on an east to west axis to best capture the sun so that a third party could come in later and finance and install the solar panels. Also, because this site is susceptible to both sea level rise and flooding, we located the first phase of our development on the highest part of the site, set back from the river. Also, since our client couldn't afford so much building perimeter and windows, we pulled the wings together and we used small courtyards to provide daylight, natural ventilation, and just a place for people to step outside during the day. Last, we committed to making all of the building systems run on electricity and not natural gas, so that when California hits its zero carbon electricity goals in 2045, fingers crossed, this building will run entirely on clean energy. So I've been talking about all of these good design strategies, but those count for very little if the building doesn't perform as it's intended. So for every project in the office, like the one I've been talking about, we set our goals and we model the building to see how we think it will perform. Some of those kind of projects exceed our goals, but many fall short. And to determine why, we visit our buildings after they're finished and we see how they're actually performing. So we collect energy use data and we see how that compares to our models. If there's a big discrepancy, we try to figure out what went wrong. We also survey the building users because there's no point in having a net zero energy building if its occupants wear jackets indoors during the winter, or people stay at home to work because their office space is too loud and distracting. We also like to check ourselves internally, including how our own office space is functioning, or how our personal carbon footprints compare to the efforts we make to pull carbon out of buildings. I mean, to be sure, we're not perfect, but we almost always get better. And that brings me back to my own story and the very first project I worked on compared with my most recent project, a little over a decade apart. A hog slaughtering company headquarters versus an organic food company headquarters. As you can see, a lot can change in a decade's time, and I hope in 2030 we can look back to say that the things that we did today in 2020 were just the beginning. I hope we can say that the steps we took then helped flatten another alarming curve, that of our warming planet, and that we help stave off the worst when facing the defining challenge of our time. Thank you.
Our eighth and final speaker has worked for decades as a commercial assignment photographer and director, creating persuasive transaction-driving content for companies like Apple. He created the Light Grid Studio as a method for replicating high-cost production techniques, an alternative solution. Here to give his talk, Procrastinator's Paradise, Life as a Non-Essential Worker. Please welcome Bill Delzell.
I've recently been given the job title Non-Essential Worker. Before that, I might have introduced myself as any one of the following: photographer, director, producer, inventor, business owner, all skills I've worked hard to develop. But this whole lockdown thing has reminded me of one of my most familiar skills. I'm a procrastinator. I'm not particularly proud of it, but it's something I've just learned to live with. For me, the last couple of months have been a procrastinator's paradise. I've started all kinds of projects. None of them had deadlines. I didn't think it would be fair today to talk about such an important subject, not procrastination, but shaping our future, without mentioning what my high school counselor once told me. Mr. Delzell, you're showing signs of being a procrastinator. If you would only apply yourself, you might actually make something of yourself. Naturally, I pushed back a little, and then he came back with the following. Okay, you might be a high-functioning procrastinator. I remember thanking him and thinking, high-functioning, that part sounded pretty good. It's kind of a compliment. So how, you might ask, does a guy with a deadline-intensive job ever get anything done? Adaptation. My formula to success is simple. Take the skills, even the ones that are not commonly thought to be skills, and adapt them to work in your favor. We'll go into that more later, I promise. So how did I become a photographer? I first picked up a camera about the same time as I had a newspaper route. My 20-something-year-old daughter reminded me nobody's going to know what a newspaper route is. So here's a quick description. Imagine a truck dropping off a stack of papers every morning. I'd grab them, fold them, stick them in a canvas bag that hung from my bicycle handlebars. I'd ride around the neighborhood as the sun was coming up and throw them as close to their porches as I could. I think I was about 12 years old. Looking back, I think I was pretty lucky to be doing both things at the same time, because I realized that having two solid skills meant I had choices. When I started to earn a few bucks making pictures, I always say making pictures because I think there's a difference between making pictures and taking pictures. So I started making pictures and selling them. I thought I could be doing something I love, or I could keep getting up at 5 a.m. every morning and get chased by angry dogs. As luck would have it, one of those dogs actually did catch me. I took a tumble, broke my arm, and suddenly I was now a full-time one-arm photographer. I never looked back. So the point here is I've learned to adapt my skills to each job I've ever had by bringing my accumulated experience to each new assignment. That brings me to a concept that's out there that's been gaining some traction lately. It describes the range of your experiences, what I call skills in the making, as the reason why a generalist, that's a person with lots of skills in lots of areas, will win in a world that's growing more and more specialized. It's kind of an alternative to the idea that you need 10,000 hours of practice to be really good at something. My spin on that is both approaches are useful. In my own professional life, I've worked with thousands of clients over the years. It turns out my bookkeeper actually knew the exact number and once told me I had passed 27,500 customer experiences. I think I asked her to stop counting. I'm not sure why, but I just didn't want to know. And looking back, I think that reminded me of 27,500 stressed out, anxiety-filled experiences. That's kind of the dark secret of being a procrastinator. It brings on stress. So it occurred to me later that it was the combined experience of all those skills throughout my lifetime that led me to become an inventor. A big portion of all those jobs came from my studio rental business, Blue Sky Rental Studios. It was San Francisco's busiest studio. We had 7 daylight studios, each a specialized venue designed for image makers. It was a destination for many of the world's leading photographers and filmmakers. It gave me a front row seat to some of the best work of our time, from celebrities to rock stars, founders, business leaders, for many of Silicon Valley's most innovative businesses. I started to see patterns that were far more similar than different in the way that people were working and approached their work. So I decided to build this thing I call the light grid. I did it to simplify the otherwise complicated, time-consuming process of making pictures and videos. Light grid automates a big part of photography and video production using software and robotics. You can simply touch a picture in our library of images and in seconds move the lights into position. The camera settings all change, and anyone can make pictures and videos that look like you've been a pro for a lifetime. You can put your attention on what's really important, and that's what's happening in front of the camera. And who doesn't want to be a director? That's a skill I recommend every image maker develop. You can use those skills in every job you will ever have. You can also access the studio remotely and work from anywhere in the world on our collaborative platform, directing talent with teams from anywhere. I'd like to say I built it because I saw this whole work from home thing coming, but I think it was really more about conserving resources and creating access for businesses of any size. Without that wide range of experience, it's unlikely that I would have ever thought to build it. Along the way, Chris Anderson, the curator of the TED conference, learned about my new invention. He liked the idea of democratizing media, and he asked me to bring it to the TED conference in Los Angeles. I was told it was the first product ever invited without a corporate sponsor. A little later, I learned what that really meant. I was paying for everything, but it was still a real honor to be a part of that amazing event. Since then, the Light Grid has helped launch some pretty amazing projects. Peak Design did its first Kickstarter project in the Light Grid, and that became Kickstarter's most successful business ever. An Oscar-nominated documentary, Racing Extinction, used a time-lapse sequence I worked on to simulate the impact that acid had on the ocean. That clip was shown the night of the Oscars to a global audience of close to 30 million people. That all sounds pretty good, right? Well, it turns out adaptation is not for everyone, whether it's adapting to new technologies or finding ways to develop skills. So when I was asked to speak at today's TEDx event, I jumped at the chance. I'm always looking to earn more early adopters. The invite came at the end of February, and within days I went from thinking I totally got this TEDx thing to I totally don't got this TEDx thing. The world as I knew it, at least, was changing fast. I began to think I didn't know quite as much as I used to, especially as it relates to the future. When the first date was postponed, I thought, okay, I've got more time. I can use that time to make sense of all the noise out there. But then just about everyone I knew in the creative service community was out of work, practically overnight. And the noise level in the media just kept getting louder. I needed a new approach. That's when I started to realize I've never really known what the future was going to look like. I think I'll just approach this like one of my commercial assignments. I started to think, I've got this again. I also decided I'd better do some research of my own. Research for me has always been a good way to expand my perspective and keep my focus. When I want firsthand advice, I always call a friend that's an expert. I rarely go online for that type of thing. My pal Jesse, who I've known since kindergarten, makes major motion pictures. The team he was on for Black Panther won an Academy Award for production design last year. And I thought, well, he'll have some insights. And sure enough, he did. He was literally 100% optimistic that the entertainment industry was going to recover. And he was the first voice that I'd heard that actually had a get back to work plan. I thought, great, that's something I can build on. I thought, I need a back to work plan too. And then another email dropped in my inbox. TEDx was postponed again. But this time I was recognizing an old pattern in my behavior. More time first triggers a genuinely optimistic sense of well-being, but I've learned that it's not really optimism I'm feeling. It's more the absence of reality, an artist's sanctuary. That's strictly my experience, by the way. I'm sure there's some type A artists out there somewhere. Almost instantly, my active mind began to spin with all the possibilities. I was back again. I totally got this, I'm thinking. There is a silver lining in the Procrastinators playbook. And I can almost hear you asking, so how did you find yourself in a business that's filled with high-intensity deadlines? Well, I learned early on that there was nothing more motivating than either a dog chasing me or the opportunity to do something I loved. And more importantly, deadlines turned out to be my greatest motivator. It was both a trigger for action and for me a gateway to creativity and solutions. And that, my friends, is my version of adaptation. You simply take the facts as they are, the good, the bad, and everything in between, and adapt them to your ever-changing reality. So here's a question for you. How can you use your own unique superpowers, and why not call them superpowers, to shape our future? In my experience, most people like to think of themselves as problem solvers. We know from experience that just about anything has the potential to become a problem. So it stands to reason that the future will always be full of uncertainty. It's how we approach it that will define us. So lately, I've decided to think of myself as a solution finder and skip right over that whole problems waiting to happen part. I find it much more effective to work that way. When you're a solution finder, you're always ready for the future. So let's get back to the media. Since the volume right now is set to an all-time high, how can we focus on effective solutions? I think you have to ask the question, who controls the volume in your life? If you leave it to content producers, it's going to stay loud. Here's a little insight into the media. The last mile. That's where content producers work their hardest to capture your attention. I like to call it the space between ideas and eyeballs. Right now, controlling the volume is an essential skill. So I've come up with a little system I call MILE. Think of it as self-defense for your brain. It stands for Media, Interactive Literacy, and Engagement. I know it's a mouthful, so I'll break it down for you. Media is the noise in your life, and no, your parents and teachers don't count. Interactive literacy, that's where you develop self-defense skills so you can master the art of volume control. Ask yourself, am I going to be a target my whole life, or am I going to develop the skills needed to control the volume? And then there's engagement. That's where you start to make some noise of your own. Because the more you take control and contribute to the conversation, the more we can count on you to help shape our future. I want to thank Jessica and the whole TEDx team for adapting this event to the changing times we are all experiencing, and for giving me a deadline. It makes me feel kind of essential, and for that I'm grateful.
As TEDxWestmoor High School comes to an end, we would like to thank you for making history with us tonight by attending this first of its kind event. We would like to thank our lineup of speakers: Johanna Dsouza, Dawson, CJ Campos, Yuto Nishida, Stacey, Zhou, Bill Delzell, Corey Schnobrich, and Alejandro Perez. This event would not have been made possible without the lead organizers, Angela Zhang, Jessica Tai, and Kaylin Yu, and design and logistics team, Christy Hua, Leah Lau, Mustafa Abuzaria, Naomi Jha, and Mohammed Fatoni. Last but not least, we want to thank Mr. Michael Simon for all of his contributions as the co-organizer as well as the Jefferson Union High School District for their support throughout this event. We hope you would join our live Q&A session with our speakers on the Zoom call linked above right after this segment. Please send us your questions through the chat box on the Zoom after you've joined this meeting. Don't forget to fill out the giveaway form linked above to enter to win free bubble guides and Amazon gift cards. We hope that you got a head start at shaping your future at our event tonight, and we can't wait to see you again at the next TEDxWestmoorHighSchool event, coming soon!